The fiscal cliff is the single biggest near-term threat to the world economy. That is the message from Fitch in its latest outlook. Ed Parker is head of EMEA Sovereign Ratings there and joins me now. Ed, many thanks for coming in. If the US goes over the cliff, do you downgrade the US?
Well, we would likely review the US rating if that is the case. We think that going over the US cliff, although it would produce some short-term benefit in terms of reducing the budget deficit, that would only be short-term in that it wouldn't address the long-term drivers of expenditure and the weak tax base. It would further undermine the credibility of US fiscal policy and would tip the US into an unnecessary recession.
What other threats face the US rating?
The other key issue is the debt ceiling, whereby this is the statutory limit on US debt set by Congress, which even with the US Treasury using all the ways and means that it has, would likely be expended by February or March. So this needs to be raised, otherwise the US will default.
So very large chance the US could lose its AAA next year, early next year.
I'm not saying it's a very large chance because we expect the US fiscal cliff to be avoided and the US debt ceiling to be raised. Obviously, if we didn't expect the US debt ceiling to be raised, the US would not be AAA. But there we think it's important that this is not left to 1 minute to midnight as it was in August, but is cleared up sometime, weeks in advance.
If you're a betting man, bigger chance of the UK losing its AAA next year or the US?
Well, I'm not going to give probabilities. The UK and the US are on negative outlooks, so that's signalling that there is a slightly greater than 50% chance of a downgrade.
So the UK as well could well lose that AAA next year?
Well, it's on negative outlook, so as I say, that's the signal that we're sending.
What about France? I guess we can throw that into the same camp as well.
We can. France is also AAA on a negative outlook. So these are three, along with Germany, of the four big benchmark AAA countries, with three of them on negative outlook.
How worried are you? I mean, you've warned in this report that the urgency to sort out the problems, the urgency among the politicians in Europe is waning. What would that mean for ratings, do you think?
Well, for the Eurozone crisis, I think, clearly the urgency or the intensity of the crisis has eased a bit since the summer with the ECB's announcement of its outright monetary transaction programme. But we're concerned that that could take the pressure off politicians, particularly in terms of constructing this future vision of a completed economic and monetary union. So what we're seeing is that, for example, with banking union, there has been some forward progress, but it's very slow. And European politicians don't really want deeper integration, but it's only really where they're being forced by the markets that we're seeing movement in that direction.
Does the recent buyback in Greece make its debt anywhere near sustainable?
We think it does make a big difference to Greece, but even with this and with favourable projections for its budget deficits and growth, that debt will only come down till a bit above 120% of GDP by 2020. And obviously those projections are extremely uncertain because what we've seen over the last few years that they've been continually revised for the worse.
And what about write-downs on the loans that other Eurozone countries have given to Greece? Could it lead to downgrades in the Netherlands and Finland as well as countries like France?
Well, the loans to Greece are still relatively small as a proportion of the lender's GDP. So what we have said is that rising contingent liabilities more generally for the stronger countries in Europe, including France, could lead to downgrades. But with just Greece on its own, that's unlikely to be the one that tips them over in terms of downgrades. It would be more bigger countries that would be likely to do that.
I want to get a quick final word on emerging markets. Do you expect their ratings to continue rising, or do you think spillover from the rest of the world, be it the fiscal cliff, be it the Eurozone crisis, is going to start impacting those ratings?
Well, we have seen over the last few years pretty strong upward movement in emerging market ratings, but last year we saw a slowdown, only 6 emerging market upgrades after 18 in 2011, and we only have 6 of them now on a positive outlook. So it is a more difficult environment for emerging markets, and that's reflecting not only the spillovers from advanced country problems, but also their domestic challenges.
Very quickly, given this US situation, do you guys at Fitch have to be working New Year's Eve? I guess you do. All the rating agencies do, right?
We do. There will be people in the office over that time. Personally, I'll be on the end of a BlackBerry, so we're very much hoping that this will be sorted out.
All right, Ed, thanks a lot for coming in today. Fitch's Ed Parker. That's it from me. I'm Axel Threlfall. This is Reuters.